Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering today. I'd like to speak with you about China, not merely as a country on the global map, but as a dynamic, evolving major power whose recent actions in trade, diplomacy, and economic policy are sending important signals to the world. China has just announced that it will suspend an additional 24% tariff on U.S. goods for 1 year. Fidelity. At the same time, China will retain a 10% levy on those goods. Korea Jungang Daily. Meanwhile, in parallel, China will end retaliatory tariffs on certain U.S. agricultural products including soybeans, corn, wheat, sorghum and chicken starting November 10, 2025. Arabian business. These decisions mark a significant pivot in China's trade posture toward the United States, and by extension, toward the global economy. But what are the implications? What lies behind these moves? And what should we watch for as China continues to navigate its path? First, the basics. China's suspension of the 24% tariff is scheduled to go into effect from November 10, 2025. Report.az. It follows a meeting between China's President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump, signaling a fragile but noteworthy thaw in trade tensions. The Business Times. On the agricultural front, Chinese buyers of U.S. farm goods, who had largely shifted to Brazilian alternatives due to cost and tariffs, now see a window of opportunity for increased U.S. imports. Reuters. But notice, despite the concessions, China is not fully lifting tariffs. The 10% base levy remains. Soybeans still face a roughly 13% tariff, making U.S. shipments less competitive versus Brazilian ones. Reuters. So we must see this not as surrender but as strategic recalibration. Why would China make these moves now? Several factors converge. China is navigating a delicate balance between maintaining leverage in trade talks, preserving its own domestic industry, and signaling openness to commerce. China faces slower economic growth, supply chain disruptions, and global headwinds. Relaxing tariffs helps ease external pressure and keep markets stable. The agricultural sector provides a visible way to ease U.S.-China tensions without giving up broader structural advantages in manufacturing and high-tech, hence the selective nature of the concessions. By retaining the 10% levy and keeping soybeans subject to tariffs, China retains bargaining power. The pause of the 24% rate buys time, perhaps for deeper negotiations. What are the wider implications for China? 1. Economic. Lower tariffs on U.S. goods mean cheaper imports, potential reopening of U.S. farm goods markets, and incremental relief to sectors hit by trade conflict. But since the tariffs aren't fully removed, Chinese domestic industries that benefited from protection still have breathing room. 2. Geopolitical. China's approach signals to global markets and to other trading partners that it is willing to engage, that it wants the U.S.-China economic relationship to stabilize. That helps Beijing in its broader ambition to present itself as a reliable partner rather than an unpredictable adversary. 3. Domestic. Internally, China may use this moment to emphasize that its leadership can deliver win-win outcomes in trade, boosting domestic confidence. Simultaneously, by keeping certain tariffs, it signals to local industries that protection remains available if needed. 4. Global supply chains. A reduction of trade friction between the two largest economies can relieve pressure on global supply chains, costs of goods, and investor sentiment. For China, this means reinforcing its role as a key node in global manufacturing and trade. However, we must also recognize the risks and limitations. The remaining tariffs and the fact of only a 1-year suspension suggest this is a temporary truce, not a full reset. If deeper structural issues, such as intellectual property, export controls, tech competition, are unaddressed, tensions may flare again. U.S. firms and farmers may not instantly return to Chinese markets, especially if cost advantages lie with other suppliers, e.g., Brazil for soybeans. That means China's symbolic move may not translate into immediate large-scale trade flows. Domestic Chinese industries might feel exposed if competition from U.S. imports increases. Hence, China must manage both external and internal interests. The global environment remains volatile. Political changes, global inflation, supply chain disruptions, and technology rivalry mean the best-laid plans can be disrupted. What does this mean for other stakeholders? For U.S. exporters, there is an opening, but one must act quickly and strategically. Re-entering the Chinese market will require competitiveness, reliable supply, and cost-effectiveness. For global investors, the easing of trade tensions is a positive signal, but the incomplete nature of the concessions means caution is warranted. 4 global supply chain managers. This provides breathing room, but the underlying China, U.S. competition in technology, rare earths, manufacturing remains very much alive. 4 other countries watching China. This shows that China values flexibility, and that trade relations with China may increasingly be shaped by negotiation rather than unilateral protection. As we look ahead, here are some watch points. Will China follow through on actual purchases of U.S. farm goods, as signaling suggests? Will China loosen non-tariff barriers, e.g., export controls, standards, licensing, alongside these tariff moves? Will structural issues, such as technology transfer, subsidy practices, state-owned enterprises, be addressed, or remain latent conflicts? How will the U.S. respond? A reciprocal reduction by the U.S. or further demands could define the next phase. What happens after the 1-year suspension? Will the tariffs return, or will a longer-term deal emerge? In closing, China's decision to suspend the extra 24% tariff on U.S. goods while maintaining a base 10% levy, and its decision to lift certain tariffs on U.S. farm goods, is a significant step. It reveals a Chinese leadership that is flexible and pragmatic, willing to open a window of engagement while preserving strategic protection. But this is no moment for complacency. This is a tactical pause, not a conclusion. For China, this is an opportunity to reshape its economic ties, rebuild global economic trust, and secure its role as the world's manufacturing and export powerhouse. For the rest of us, this is a moment to pay attention, to adjust strategies, seize opportunities, and remain vigilant about the uncertainties ahead. Thank you for your attention.